Hey, okay. So today is about Martin Heidegger. And if you've seen the Sartre videos where we went through being and nothingness, today or this video series, I'd like to look at Martin Heidegger's Being and Time, which is this one. The copy that I have here of Heidegger's Being and Time is the Joan Stambaugh translation, and that's what I'll be referring to throughout the series. There's another common translation out by Macquarie and Robinson, and that was standard for a long time. And this one's the more recent translation. I'm not sure which one is preferred in academic circles, but I have this one, and so it's not hugely important, I think, which translation you use, but some of the terms are translated differently between the two books, and since Heidegger uses a lot of new terminology, he creates a lot of his own original terms and expressions that can be a point of confusion if you're kind of working from one translation and someone's working from a different translation. But so we're on the same page, Joan Stambaugh's the copy that the translation that I'm going to work through. Where I'm aware of any differences in terms, I will endeavour to use both. But yeah, just be aware as we go through Being and Time. It's Joan Stambaugh is what I'm using. And while I'm on the topic, so a couple of companion books which are really good. Actually, I found this one. It's a Routledge guidebook to Being and Time, written by Stephen Mulhall, and this one really accessible. It's really he really helps to deepen your understanding of some of the more complicated ideas in Being and Time. And also this one, William Blattner wrote a guidebook to Being and Time. And what's good about this one is he really goes through kind of section by section, and you can, if there is a particular section you have difficulty with, you can find it very easily in this book, and you can see, and Blattner really explains it well. So these are two books that I would recommend as kind of supplementary readings if you are going to work through Being and Time. So Martin Heidegger was a existentialist, and a lot of Sartre's thought actually came from Heidegger and Husserl and Hegel as well. But I think it's fair to say Heidegger really kick-started this whole existentialist movement, kind of kicked it into overdrive, if you like. And then people like Sartre and Merleau-Ponty came on afterwards. But he's the foundation, if you like. He kicked it off. So it's fitting that we have a look at Being and Time. And if there are any two texts that you must read to come to grips with existentialism, it's Being and Nothingness by Sartre and Heidegger's Being and Time. So both of those are really essential reading as for anyone interested in existentialism. So anyway, that's what this video series is going to be about, Being and Time. I'm just going to work through Being and Time the same way I worked through Being and Nothingness, section by section, just highlighting what I consider to be the important points in the book, and hopefully after some time we'll get through to the end. But this particular video, I just want to have a look at Heidegger himself, who he was, and a little discussion about a short biography about him, and then we'll start looking at being and time itself in the next video. So Heidegger was German. He was born in September 1889. His father was the sexton of the village church, and Heidegger was raised Catholic. He enrolled originally at university to study theology, but after discovering Husserl's ideas, he switched major to mathematics and philosophy. Those seems to be quite a common refrain from that time period too, right? Father was a sexton or priest or pastor, raised religious, studied theology at university. That just seems to be something that crops up again and again when discussing or when looking at biographies of philosophers. Anyway, he actually got married in 1917 and had two sons. And around this time, he broke with Catholicism as well. Again, really common story there, I think. He became Husserl's assistant in 1919 and received a professorship at the University of Marburg. In 1927, he wrote Being and Time, or he published Being and Time. And when Husserl retired the following year, 1928, Heidegger took over from him at the University of Freiburg. Now, gets a little bit interesting here. He joined the Nazi Party in 1933, and the extent to which Heidegger was or subscribed to Nazi ideology has been a really contentious issue pretty much ever since then. And it seems that there are people on both sides of the divide, people kind of who want to stress that Heidegger was a Nazi. He was anti-Semitic. He had he bought into the Nazi ideology and so on and so forth. And people on the other side who say, well, he was really he joined because if you didn't, you couldn't continue working. You were unable to continue in society if you refused to get behind the Nazis. So more like an opportunistic kind of involvement. Anyway, we'll have a look at that in just a minute. But he remained a member of the party until 1945, until the end of the Second World War. And after that time, he was banned from lecturing and had a nervous breakdown in 1946. And in 1949, after the denazification hearings were completed, he was pronounced a Mitlaufer. And the Mitlaufer was the lowest of, the second lowest of 5 categories of Nazi involvement. So the highest category being, a card-carrying Nazi, if you like, subscribing to the ideology, wanting to eradicate Jews and so on and so forth. And so he was the second. He was deemed to be, or his involvement was deemed to have been at that second lowest level, Mitlaufer. And after that, he was able to return to teaching, which he did so at Freiburg in 1950. So, was Heidegger a true Nazi? It's hard to say, and he was never really that helpful on the subject either, because he always refused to criticize Nazi atrocities or renounce his involvement with Nazism. And the most he did, I think, as far as I'm aware, is he called it the greatest stupidity of my life, which isn't really enough, right? I mean, he didn't demonstrate, I think, that what I would have liked him to have shown, which is, you know, that the Nazi ideology and the things that the crimes that they carried out were heinous and you know, atrocious, and just, he didn't condemn them, and he didn't condemn what they did, and he should have. So in that sense, yes, he failed in some way, right? And was he a Nazi? Well, he joined the Nazi Party. He was a Nazi then, right? But there is another, and without trying to be kind of apologetic about it, I don't think that he was. I don't think he was anti-Semitic first, and I doubt that he was really behind the Nazis completely. I think Mitlaufer is perfect, actually, to describe Heidegger. It was more like, I mean, it was really join or get out. You know, join or you're done. You're not going to be doing anything else. You're certainly not going to be teaching. So, faced with that choice, I think he decided to take the easy option. And if you want to criticize Heidegger, that's where criticism. I think that's where criticism is justified. He didn't stand up to the atrocities that the Nazis were committing. He didn't object to the nonsense, to the absurd ideology of the Nazis, and he should have. So in that sense, like I say, yeah, he's guilty. But was he an anti-Semite? Did he, you know, was he all about the supremacy of the Aryan race? I doubt it. I'm not sure about that. And first of all, it's just the fact that we're so unsure. Just the fact that there's that much confusion about the issue, you know, that seems to suggest that, well, if the people who are trying to peg him as just another Nazi, they have to go to so much trouble, you know, they're looking through his writings and cherry picking quotes that can be perhaps interpreted in such a way that, you know, this is backing white supremacy, or, you know, this is he's saying that Jews are what he's talking about here is the Jews being inauthentic, blah blah blah. I mean, just that they have to go to that much trouble. It seems to me that, well, I mean, Heidegger didn't make it clear himself. So if Heidegger's not asserting his Nazism, and we're kind of having to read it from him, already there's kind of reason to doubt, I think. Another reason is that he had two affairs, actually, with two of his students, one with Hannah Arendt and one with Elizabeth Blockman. And Arendt was Jewish, and Blockman had one Jewish parent. And Heidegger also helped Blockman escape Germany or get out of Germany, emigrate to avoid persecution by the Nazis. Now, these are very, very strange things for someone to do if they're anti-Semitic, right? I mean, when I say very strange, I mean unthinkable. You're not going to have an affair with a Jew if you're anti-Semitic. So I find that the charge of anti-Semitism against Heidegger pretty thin. And just on that, let alone the fact that after having actually read Being in Time and a number of his post Being in Time essays, there's just nothing in there really that suggests he was an anti-Semite, that suggests he was about pure blood, that suggests that he was endorsing Nazi ideology. There's just nothing in there at all. Heidegger was all about being. He was all about human existence. And which is not to say that if he was a Nazi, if he was a full-on Nazi, subscribed to their ideology and so on, then that could feasibly come through in some of his writings. I mean, he's talking about human existence, what it means for us to exist. That could quite conceivably, a Nazi, if he was a Nazi, that kind of their ideology and beliefs could come through in there, but they don't at all. So any attempt, I think, in my opinion, any attempt to get anything Nazi related out of Heidegger's writings is kind of coming at it with the idea that Heidegger's guilty already, guilty before, until proven innocent, kind of. And I don't think that there's anything in any of his writing that suggests he was that way inclined. Again, this isn't to excuse Heidegger for not standing up to them. It's just to say that I don't think he subscribed to their ideology. Even though he joined the party, I think, in order to, because that's what you had to do to continue to live and work in Germany at the time. And I think that's what he did. Not an excuse for him, but, if we're interested in whether Heidegger really supported the Nazis, was really bought into their ideology, hated the Jews, then I think we have to conclude that he didn't go that far. He wasn't that far. He joined because as he saw it, he had to. So that's just a little bit about his Nazi involvement. And there's something else I want to mention too, though. A friend of mine said that they're not interested in Heidegger because he was a Nazi. And that kind of his Nazi inclinations will show through in his writings. As I've already said, that's not a good reason to disregard a philosopher's writings and their thoughts. Aristotle was sexist, right? But we don't say, well, because he was sexist, I'm not going to read Aristotle. You'd be crazy to say that. He was sexist, so when he talks about, when he has passages about women and about their role in society, we disregard those passages. But we don't disregard the entirety of Aristotle. That would be crazy, right? So when he talks about morality, but his sexism will show through in his morality. Yeah, his morality was for men. It was for white males who were citizens of Athens and who were generally landowners, right? But his morals still have value. We can just apply them to a broader group of people, including women. So there's no reason to disregard Aristotle because of that. Another point, think about someone like Schopenhauer. Apparently he was really quite an unpleasant character. And I mean, if you read him, he hammers Hegel. He detested Hegel, and his writing is peppered with invective against the guy. And so he seems like a pretty not that nice a character. but we don't turn away from his writings and his thoughts and his ideas because of his character, because of what he was like at home in his personal life. I mean, and it would be foolish to do that. If we did that, I mean, we wouldn't pay attention to half of the philosophers that we read. We wouldn't pay attention to half of the scientists, politicians, anybody, right? We don't judge people's thoughts by their character. And the same, I think, is true in this case with Heidegger. Okay, so even if I mean, he joined the Nazi Party, but even if he subscribed fully to their ideals, their ideology, if his writing, if his thoughts about philosophy don't have that same bias, don't import those kind of ideas in toto, then we should pay attention to them. There's no reason to dismiss Heidegger out of hand just because of, say, his political involvement or his political affiliations, right? So in that sense, thinking about Heidegger as a philosopher, whether he was a real Nazi or whether he wasn't, whether he was just a Nazi in name only, in a way, I'm just not that interested. I'm interested in his ideas. If his ideas were all about keeping the race pure and eliminating an entire class of people from society, then that's a different story, obviously. But if his writings are about human existence and they show none of this, no racism or bigotry, then his ideas are they're still valid as far as I'm concerned. And that is the case I think we have with Heidegger. He has a bad reputation in the West, I think, because of his involvement with the Nazis. But I don't think any of his philosophy is related to any Nazi ideology or beliefs at all. And so, really, I mean, again, like when you're reading Heidegger, just disregard that, I think, is the best way to go. In the same way that when you're reading Schopenhauer, you don't have in the back of your mind, oh, this guy was a really cantankerous old so-and-so, whatever. You don't keep that in mind. You just read Schopenhauer for his ideas about human life, about the will, about the world. That's what you keep in mind. And same thing, I think, we should have in mind with Heidegger. So anyway, okay, enough ranting. Man, that was a massive rant, eh? Again, I'm not trying to absolve Heidegger. I'm not saying he's free from blame, or I'm just saying we need to be aware that we'll be measured, I think, in our criticism of him. I think it's inappropriate to go ahead and say, well, he was a Nazi, and kind of lump him in with Adolf Hitler. He wasn't that extreme. He wasn't at that level. He was a Mitläufer. And actually Mitläufer means, literally, I think it means with runner, as in someone who just goes along with the crowd. And I think that is the perfect description of Heidegger's involvement with the Nazis. Condemn him for that, criticize him for that, blame him for that, sure. He definitely failed in that respect. But is everything he did infused with Nazi ideology? Of course not. Well, it could be, read it for yourself and make your own decision. Personally, I don't think so. And I think you'd have to look long and hard to get anything, and you'd have to interpret or misinterpret Heidegger, I think, deliberately in order to find that kind of connection. So anyway, stop, no more. Okay, so he had affairs with two of his students. Interesting. And what's interesting about that actually is that Heidegger and his wife, they actually had an open relationship in which they both had extramarital affairs. And even weirder, Blockman was a friend and former classmate of his wife's. So, and if you remember Sartre and his romantic interest, Simone de Beauvoir, they also had that kind of open relationship. So, I don't know. Existentialism, open relations. Don't touch that. Heidegger died in 1976, and that's the end of it. Now, like I said, that's pretty much all I want to talk about in this video. Just a couple of things about being in time. It is crazy difficult. It's a really difficult text to work through. Like being in nothingness was very difficult. I think being in time, there's an extra difficulty with being in time in that there's just so much new, there are so many new terms and expressions and phrases that Heidegger coins that it does require a lot of brain power to kind of nut out what exactly he's aiming at. But again, like I say, I think it's really well worth the struggle. And it's only half as long as being in nothingness, so there's a bonus. The just the overall theme of being in time, he talks about the existence, human existence, which he calls Dasein. So there's a terminology. There's some terminology already for you, Dasein, and what it is it's just. I was thinking about it the other day. It's not really a he's not looking at the meaning of human existence, what it kind of means to exist. He's describing how humans exist, how we live in the world. And I think that's and that really is the bulk of being in time. And we'll look at that more starting in the next video. So I'm going to sign off there. Thanks guys, see you next video.